watching.
Subscribe. Hello, you're watching ScreenStalker. I'm Laurie Blake. This is Simon Longdon, and The Mandalorian is finally out in the wilds on Disney+. Jon Favreau's live-action Star Wars series. $100 million.
Yes.
Disney spent on this, and boy, $100 million. You can see where that money went.
Yeah.
From The Mandalorian. We're going to review episode 1. Because that's the only episode that's out, funnily enough. But also we're going to be doing a sort of spoiler-free version initially, like 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to go deep diving into spoilers after that. So
we'll mark it very clearly about the 10-minute mark.
Yeah, we'll do there'll be a flash of light, and the screen will go black, and then the Fiend will appear and say spoilers now. So if you haven't watched it, then stick with us for this bit. If you have watched it and you're interested in our thoughts more deeply on what happened in the actual episode, then stick around for that as well. To start with, I loved the tone of this series. Like, I'm not the biggest Star Wars guy. I find that sometimes it gets...
Well, that do you mean you don't like it?
No, I do like it. I do like it. I sometimes find that like there's so much stuff, and there's so many like references and back references and mentioning all these different things that because I don't really know and I didn't really watch as a kid, like I get lost. And what's interesting about The Mandalorian is that it kind of exists in a blank period of Star Wars history. Like they were saying in all the interviews before it came out, it's like 7 years after the Battle of Endor. Like, so it's like in sort of a...
It's about 5 years after the end of the third original movie. Yeah.
And so it's in this sort of like unexplored period of Star Wars canon, and it's a relatively peaceful time in Star Wars. So it allows this show to kind of exist outside of everything you kind of really know about Star Wars. There is a lot of referencing, and there's a lot of like visual sort of throwbacks and callbacks and stuff. But actually, as plot goes, it's quite sparse. It's quite like you can kind of just dip into it and get the gist of it very easily, I found.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's similar to Rogue One, existing in a very particular time frame, which you could make shows about forever if you wanted to. You don't have to ever necessarily move on it from that moment. But I think you're right that it's picking what is not only visually a very recognizable part of the Star Wars universe. It is all the old look of the original trilogy that everyone likes. But similar to how Spider-Man functions in the MCU, the Mandalorians are sort of... They have that much more their own fleshed out lore and history in Star Wars that doesn't necessarily involve huge galactic struggles. So that if you start doing like stories about the Jedi and the Sith, you are constantly caught up in the battle for control of the universe and the galaxy. Yeah. Whereas, yes, the Mandalorians have got a very rich, broad history way back in Star Wars history. But in terms of this moment, they are simply, we are looking at the last one, and we are looking at a bounty hunter. That is what the Mandalorians have become and have been for so long. So I think it's perfectly pitched in terms of the lore side, but in terms of the actual show itself, I thought the aesthetic is amazing. The music is great.
The music's incredible. So the music was done by, I wrote his name down, Ludwig Göransson. What I liked about it was like every scene had a very different score to it.
Yeah,
and
really
at no point was it like so obviously like, let's just play John Williams and get everyone excited. It was very much its own thing, and actually, because I think you get so used to kind of the John Williams aesthetic with Star Wars as well, that kind of like the sort of audible signature of his work, that when you hear different music overlaid over something that is so visually strikingly Star Wars, you're like, wow, that's so fresh.
It is a badass Western set in space that happens to look like Star Wars. And that's the genius of it.
Oh, it is a boss series.
Yeah,
it was
so
fun.
From the moment it starts. I mean, even though Pedro Pascal, who plays Mandalorian, he obviously has got the helmet on, but immediately this character has just got presence. You know, the universe feels fleshed out quickly. There's a lot of jargon, but I don't think it slows it down.
No,
you know,
you get whatever. But I think that's the thing. There's an implicit. There's a meaning behind all the characters, and there's a meaning behind every interaction, and you get what it is. Essentially, there's scenes where they're trading made up money and goods and all that other stuff, and you're like, okay, well, I get what that means, and I get who that character is by kind of the trappings of who he's surrounded by, even though if you don't catch their names or whatever it is. And I think that gives it that very Western feel that it's like everyone's kind of drifting through. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's that feeling of like The Mandalorian specifically has a very Clint Eastwoody.
Well, Pedro Pascal Pedro Pascal described the way he was playing it as being very Clint Eastwood, and that's how he's described it in Press Team. So that's obviously to make this very Western. You know, that is obviously a very deliberate move on their part, and I think even he has like a sort of certain saunter in his walk. Yeah,
it's that sort of hard-boiled feeling of like you just legitimate tough guy, and then the story tells you sort of. Not necessarily explicitly that he's got a heart of gold somewhere in there, and it's that sort of push me pull you between what he's being driven to do and what he actually wants to do by the state of the sort of the world around him. Because clearly, I think what this show first episode makes clear is that because of the state of the galaxy currently, it's a hard time to be a bounty hunter. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a little while when we go into spoiler territory and why that is. But you get this whole sense that like, yeah, it's a Western, but it's because the galaxy's become a Wild West. It's not exactly it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was and in terms of that kind of Western visual as well, the sort of a lot of it takes place in these very sparse environments, these quite run down parts of the Star Wars galaxy, and I think what that means is two things. One is that it means they're able to concentrate. Yes, they had a lot of money to make this show, but that's nothing like movie money still. No. So it means that by doing it this way, yes, it all serves this moody aesthetic. I wouldn't call it dark, which is what I thought the kind of build up to this was. Holy cow, they're going to do a dark, brooding, very adult focused story within the Star Wars universe. I wouldn't call it dark, but it is definitely a proper grown-up TV show. Yeah, there is no, there's no childishness to it.
I think you can tell that by the pacing of it as well, though, because it's like this first episode, while it has it has an amazing opening sequence, and then the pace slows right down, and we get all of this, and it's not really exposition. It's like. No. It is exposition in the fact it sort of sets up the parameters of what the Mandalorian is going to be doing for what feels like the season, but it doesn't give anything away about who he is like too deeply. It doesn't give anything away about the motivations of the other people involved in the narrative. Like it's playing its cards very close to its chest, and that kind of, to me, made it feel much more like the beginning of a 6-hour film rather than the first episode of a TV series. First episodes of a TV series, I think normally would say like, yes, end on a big cliffhanger, and this ends on a big cliffhanger. But like they do much more sort of who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? What's this? What's this? What's this? And this just sort of just goes, here's a thing, here's a thing, here's a thing. You find out later. Yeah. And it's so much of that. And it really feels like you come away with so much mystery and so much. I'm really excited to see what happens next because I want to find out what everyone is up to.
Yeah, I like the fact that in that sense, The Mandalorian, played by Pedro Pascal, is kind of one of 3-4 characters. That's it. It's very simple. I think that's again coming back to that. It's deliberately paced. It's deliberately simple, but in a way that all pushes a very deliberate tone, and everything is working towards that. And like we were saying before about the visuals and the graphics, because they have to concentrate their money on the CGI in very small places, that is also driving them towards these more sparse uses of it, which in this first episode creates a few moments where some really lovely direction and just camera work and just very cool shots that normally with something that's got a lot of CGI you don't normally see. It's normally packed.
Yeah.
I feel that CGI is often very busy, whereas this is like, at one point there's just a shot where they're in silhouette. The whole screen is just one guy, the Mandalorian, and a speeder. That's it. But that speeder, they've put all the graphics in that speeder.
Yeah.
So but the result of that is it looks incredible.
Yeah.
It looks movie quality because they've been very smart with how they've done it. And I think the fact that happens then tie into everything the show is trying to achieve, and I think you understand everything. You understand everything the show is trying to achieve from that first episode. You don't really learn anything, but you know all you need to know about the Mandalorian.
Yeah, and I think
all you need to know about what he's trying to do, and then you get given the big at the end, and you go,
well, that's going to upset the apple cart.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I like that. Like, it's interesting you're saying about that shot of the focus being, here's the Mandalorian in silhouette, and here is a Star Wars thing. That very much felt like the kind of overall that you could apply that to the whole episode. Is like, interestingly, for a Star Wars anything, this is a show that it's 40 minutes and it just follows one guy. There's no scenes with anyone else. There's no scenes, like, we don't cut away to somewhere else in the galaxy and find out what's going on over there. We only see what is happening from one person's perspective. And I think because Star Wars does so much in the movies, jumping around to be like, we're on the Rebels side, we're on the Empire side, we're here, here's Luke, here's this thing. To focus in on one person and their motivations and what they're doing feels really striking in a Star Wars product.
Yeah,
and you can dress it with all the and they dress it with, there is so much Star Wars content in here of like little callbacks, little fun bits, characters you recognize.
Yeah, I will say though that if you'd never ever seen, if you had never even heard of Star Wars before, the show still works and still works brilliantly. I think there are moments particularly in some of the most recent films, where that hasn't been the case. I think in this, because it's so, like you were saying, we're just following this one character. And yeah, he's a bounty hunter. We should be on this kind of quite lone quest. And again, that goes to the music as well, which has this kind of sparseness to it. So there's a lot of gaps between the notes and stuff. It's just really, really interesting. But yeah, like, we are just on this one guy, and he is alone in his pursuit. And I think that's, like you said, that's quite a unique one for a Star Wars story. But also, for Star Wars, big Star Wars fans like myself, who, the stories and everything about the Mandalorians, Jango Fett, Boba Fett, all this, they have always been the coolest thing, because also we've never seen them properly as well either.
Sweet jetpacks.
Yeah, they've got jetpacks. But they have always been the coolest thing. And not only that, they became the other coolest thing, which is the Stormtroopers. You know what I mean? It's all that, and to finally see, a bounty hunter story get played out properly, and it is just exactly what you want, which is him wandering around being really cool and not really being. I like the fact he's not particularly. He's not wacky and zany like a lot of the sort of Marvel stuff, or like Han Solo was in Solo. I think it really does feel like this is very much a this has not felt the heavy touch of Disney. It doesn't feel like that. It obviously has. It's on there, but I think they very much decided, well, now we've got a streaming service, we need something to pitch at a higher age bracket. And this is the exact character at the exact moment with the exact part of the unexplored galaxy. And then let's get people in who know about that stuff, who want to make that stuff. And like, you look down the list of directors, obviously Jon Favreau is doing a lot of it. One of the writers is actually one of the Thor writers. You've got Taika Waititi, who's going to direct the final episode. Bryce Dallas Howard is going to direct one of the episodes.
This episode was directed by Dave Filoni, who has done all of these. So this is his first live action directorial role, and he did all of the like Clone Wars stuff,
which is really the only.
And he also did he also worked on Last Airbender, I believe, as well,
Yeah,
which
he
was
did.
another sort of like, I think Clone Wars and Last Airbender both fit the bracket of kids' property overall,
Yeah.
adult orientated, and this almost has this is almost taking that to the extreme of taking like, this is like Star Wars is very much like, feels like a kid's thing, but because everyone's grown up now, you need to take it to that next level.
Yeah, and I think it was the right choice as well, because the Clone Wars series is kind of the only place we've actually really fully explored, you know, what the sort of events of what led to the Clone Wars and that kind of thing, and all those other characters. So, yeah, I just think it's yes, it's had a lot of money thrown at it. Yes, they have just kind of gone, let's do the really cool character everyone keeps asking us for.
Yep.
But at the same time, they've waited, they've chosen the right people at the right moment who have pitched the right story and the right version of the character. And I just think I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no.
I just think it's absolutely amazing.
I also think one thing I'd like, before we get into the spoiler part of the review, I'd like to say that the other thing about this is like, I think from the chat we've done so far, we've made it sound quite dour if you haven't seen it, in the sense that it's quite self-serious. It is a Western, which are typically quite serious films. But it's actually really funny.
Yeah, it's got some
And
really light
there were
moments.
some multiple little setups and little scenes that really made me chuckle throughout. And also I think we get some bits with the Mandalorian where he's not messing around, but he's humanized.
Yes.
Like he's it's not, while he's obviously a faceless character in a mask, you get to see some of the person underneath at some points. And it'd be interesting to see as the series goes on how they scratch away at the surface of that and reveal a bit more. But let's do the bit we actually want to do and dive really deep into some spoilerific stuff now.
Spoilers.
So if you haven't seen The Mandalorian, leave now and come back when you've watched it, because we're going to wreck it for you otherwise.
Yeah. So, spoilers.
Spoiler klaxon.
Yeah.
I haven't added that in post.
No, we'll add it.
I haven't added it in post. I'm telling you now.
Oh, you
No, this is it. I'm calling it. I'm calling it on the day. I haven't done it.
Oh, did you add this?
No.
You didn't add that either.
No, I didn't add
That's
that
a shame. I really like that one.
Well, let's go into spoilers, because let's start at the beginning of the show with that opening scene where it's a cantina. I'm not sure what ice planet it was, but it had echoes of Hoth or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't Hoth, but it was.
Yeah, it was an ice Tatooine to me, basically, and it was the kind of felt like a very classic Star Wars opening.
I have a feeling it might have actually been one of the sort of old Mandalorian sort of planets. I think it might have been like a reference to that. Not important, but I thought it was. I think that's what they did.
But I think this was the scene that really sold the Western in space vibe, right? Like good Westerns start with a lone gunslinger walking into a bar and getting a drink
and
gets in a fight, and that is exactly what happened here. I adored this scene. I loved it.
So good.
I love you've got the classic, trio of miscreants duffing up a guy in the bar. Mandalorian comes in. He accidentally ends up embroiled in the fight, and then it flips it on its head, and it turns out that he's there to collect the bounty on the guy the miscreants were trying to duff up. I loved it.
And then, so there's this sort of blue guy. I'm not he does describe what he is later on, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't know, but that was a joke. But it's a guy from...
Phalanx, was it? Did he call himself a Phalanx?
Maybe, but it was a guy from SNL.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So it's kind of quite this sort of blue alien guy. He's been collared by these bullies, basically, it seems. And then, the big fight happens, and then the Mandalorian just turns silently. By the way, this fight as well. This is the fight that's in the trailer.
Yeah.
So you see the guy get dragged through the door, it's really cool.
Killed by the cat's anus.
Yeah. And then he spins around, and all he does is silently put down what's called the puck, like a sort of hockey puck that displays a little hologram of the person, the identity of the bounty. So all he does is just silently just put it down, and it goes, and the guy just goes, "Oh."
And he delivers a great line there, and he turns to him and he just goes, "Look, I can take you in warm, or I can take you in cold."
Yeah.
And then the guy's just like, "Oh, okay, I'm coming with you." It said everything it needed to say about the character. It was like, he's a badass. There's that, you get that bent that like he's honorable somewhere underneath all of it. When he
gives him the choice.
He kind of comes to the guy, and he gives the guy the choice, but he also kind of comes to his aid, and it's sort of suggested in that moment that he's coming to the guy's aid. And then it is, no, this is my mission.
Yeah.
And that comes above everything
You're coming
else.
now.
Yeah, you have to. I just, as a pure moment of just setting up your expectations of somebody, I just thought it was so good. And also, I think of the series as well, like the framing of it just said, like, this is what you're getting. You are getting the Wild West in space.
And also, it's also, in a silly way, it kind of also showed what his skills are. Mm-hmm. So, it's like a quick shot with a gun, a quick bit of hand-to-hand, and then using his grappling gun to do the final kill. It's just like, that is, for uber nerds like me, that is how they learned to fight back, way back. That is the Mandalorian skill set. I just thought it was a really cool kind of like. So he's not, he's not some superhero. He's not this. It's just skill and guile, and And I just thought, it was just the whole thing was pitched perfectly. It was so cool. Then so after that they go out. There's quite an interesting bit where, and this is obviously going to become a thread for him. They go to this sort of strange. It's all very bleak, this sort of landscape. And he goes to this kind of weird, I guess, sort of taxi rank. Asks for a speeder. One turns up with an R2 droid in, and he says no droids. Gives him some more money, and then Brian Posehn turns up in a banged up speeder.
I saw him tweeting a picture of him in the show and him in his like nerd cave, being like aging nerd. Watches TV in the middle of the night while family's asleep, so he can see himself in Star Wars.
That's how they get to their ship. They reference some sort of danger. I kind of thought they were talking about like some like soldiers or some sort of like other creatures that are out there. And then and then the ice starts to crack. Yeah. And out comes a sort of eel.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like a big fish monster. But to me, that was pure Star Wars kind of. It was a little bit fan servicey, I thought, in my head, because I was just like, okay, well, they just throw in weird creatures when they feel like it. But I think it also got over the point that like the galaxy isn't as structured as it was before. It's that feeling of being on the fringes and being on sort of the frontier rather than on the sort of metropolitan part of the galaxy, your Naboos or your whatever it is. Like this felt like we are on the outer edges.
Yes, and I think the way that this show and this episode just
because that's where he parked.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. And like I love the way that this episode peppered in some of the background of what the galaxy is like now. Yeah, post the fall of the Empire. So I think
you really got that in that scene where he goes to see Grief Karga, who is played by Carl Weathers, aka Apollo Creed from the Rocky films.
Well, let's not jump ahead. Let's not jump too far, because before then we get our first carbonating, which
our
is
big Star Wars reference.
Yeah. So the guy is trying to escape the clutches of the Mandalorian and goes down to the belly of the ship, pretends he uses the toilet, accidentally opens his massive gun cabinet.
He says like if you've ever seen a Whatever I Am evacuate their thorax, lucky you.
Yeah. And so he goes out to use it. Mandalorian clearly knows what he's up to. Yeah. The guy's chatting. And then he stumbles across these stacks of just blocks of carbonite like Han Solo was formed in. And it's just all the different bounties he's got. And then he just appears like a horror show behind the guy. And said, what does he say? He says like... he just says something really pithy, like "I'd say so," or something like that, or "not so far," or just says some really pithy little line. Clearly, then puts him into it, and that's when we cut to delivering to
Grief, and he literally dumps 5 or 6
little medallion things,
like these pucks on the table that are like his bounties, and says, "I've got them all." And then they're delivering all the people in carbonite, like they're hovering in, and the whole conversation with Grief, I think, is probably the most exposition we get about the state of the galaxy, because they're talking about the guild, the Bounty Hunters Guild, essentially, or whatever it's called. There's another name for it. But they're talking about how like people don't want to pay the guild rates anymore. They talk about his top bounty being 5,000 credits, and that won't cover fuel anymore. They talk about the fact that the Mandalorian won't accept Imperial credits, so we know that the Empire has fallen, and we know that like all of that stuff is kind of devalued. There's a lot in here to sort of that's not it's again we're not beat over the head with the kind of like, this is exactly like, there's no big there's no big text crawl at the beginning that tells you the state of the galaxy, which is what every Star Wars film starts with, which is like the explainer. There isn't this. I like that because it lets you read into what's happening. So that then puts the Mandalorian on the big quest to go collect this one bounty that is off the books, has to meet face to face with the guy. Goes to meet face to face with him. And this guy, I think, he remains unnamed. I think people have been calling him the Creditor.
Yeah.
And it's Werner Herzog playing him, who's just going to town on the role. And he's surrounded by rusted stormtroopers. Again, another little bit of visual storytelling to be like, well, again, like the stormtroopers were a polished military force, and here they are, weathered and worn.
A small band.
Small band of them. I think this was such an interesting setup because it obviously suggests to you, the Star Wars fan, that there's a pocket of it's like reverse resistance again. Like it's like these guys are now the sort of on the back foot and the resistance, but you get the feeling they're going to be the bad guys. And then it's interesting to see a Mandalorian on the opposite side to them, same side, opposite. Like, there's going to be tension between those two groups here. As the ending of the show sets up, but we won't jump straight to the end.
I know this is one of those interesting moments because in that, between the sort of haggling that goes on in these two moments, you see a little bit more characterization of the Mandalorian. At one point, he just says, "Well, what's your biggest bounty?" And the guy
with grief, by the way.
And the guy offers him something, and doesn't he say? Or I can give you this other currency, but only half.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "I'll take it," and goes to walk off. And then that's when he pushes him to take this other bounty.
Yeah. So because he says, "How many others you got?" And he goes, "I've got 6." And he goes, "I'll take them all." And he's like, "No, there are other. I can't just give you 6 bounties." And he's like, "Well, why is everyone else being so like? Why are you being so slow?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, no one wants to pay the guild rates."
Yeah. And then So that's when they get into this kind of haggling moment. Yeah. And the fact that he was so quick to just, well, I'll just take them all, or I'll just take half for that other one, is, to me, shows that he is also just lost and just knows bounty hunting. He doesn't actually, he doesn't seem to actually...
Well, there's some hint of desperation in his character, and you don't know what he's in, like, who's he in debt to is one potential answer. Like, what does he need the money for?
See, I got the sense that because he's a Mandalorian, he is only ever going to be a bounty hunter. He only knows bounty hunting, and the only thing he knows and loves is bounty hunting. So the money is kind of aside. There is nothing else for him to do. So give me half, I'll take it.
Well, actually, I guess and then that kind of plays into what I think was one of the more interesting scenes, because he goes to another Mandalorian. He goes to like some sort of armor smith.
So this is when we learn more about what the guild is, because it gets referenced a lot. And so the Werner Herzog offers him this down payment, which is we are very quickly explained to is this incredibly precious metal, Beskar, which has been referenced earlier on in the bar scene, and the fact that it's just a down payment clearly it's a lot. And he takes this Beskar, which we then find out is very much the Mandalorian sort of armor building material.
So it resists blasters and lightsabers, and from Star Wars, from a Wikipedia.
And he goes to this, I guess, like a sort of a blacksmith. But basically this whole bit plays like a video game.
Yeah,
he did his mission.
It's Skyrim-y. It's like feels like it's.
He did his mission. He got his material, and he took it to a guild master of some description, who then turned that chunk into a new pauldron for his shoulder. Which, again, going back in the history of the Mandalorians, they are this warrior race, and their armor is a massive source of pride for them, and like particularly making it out of this material, which is very precious, like you said, has links to their Jedi fighting backstory. So
it's like Monster Hunter. It's like, he's like he's going and killing all these guys to get the materials to make himself new sets of armor. It's weirder that it's not like he's not turning the blue guy from the opening scene into a set of armor, so he's going to be wearing his thorax as like a belt or something. But, you know.
So yeah, and that scene was really interesting. We just get
we don't all get what we want.
That had a kind of fantasy side to it, and I thought, you know, and that I just thought it was very cool. Just a bit of world building that just looks so different to anything that's been in Star Wars. And it has this amazing array of sort of like a circle of these like blue flames, and as she's battering the metal, he's getting flashbacks to his orphan childhood as a fledgling, and so you're now getting to see some of his backstory. It was brilliant scene.
So he says he was a foundling. Right?
Foundling, sorry.
So they say so she melts down the metal and makes this pauldron, and she says, "Oh, there's enough excess here to give to the foundlings. Like they're gonna make armor for the kids or whatever they're gonna use it for."
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that's good. I was once a foundling," and he's had all these visions of like what seems like his parents protecting him from this big attack. That's all silent. You don't get any sound. You know, that's all just over the top of this like. And I guess it's a mirroring. It's like the thing that forged him as a person, and the forging of him as a Mandalorian, like soldier.
Yeah, I think so. If I could be wrong, and people who know more about Star Wars than me will be able to explain it better. But I believe the foundlings are, because we're post the Clone Wars and everything. I think the foundlings were the sort of last genetic drafts of the clones, I believe. So that would make sense that he was the sort of last in that bloodline, because they were wiped out and changed. When you start to see the stormtroopers in the original 3, what they are is actually more conscripts than humans, whereas the original clone troopers were actual genetic clones of Jango Fett. And that's where that's my assumption. I don't know. I think that's what they are.
Well, what's interesting is that we don't know from here. Like,
that's true. We don't know.
It gives you such a little flash of like, it's all about intriguing you and leading you down the path and being like, well, you need to watch more, because this episode isn't really going to give you any hook in the sense of like, it's not going to go, here's the story. It's all it's trying to do is give you just enough to keep you engaged. And I think it's very perfectly paced, because we then end up on some dusty, deserty planet. He meets it's like Kuil or something, who's like this old pig man who says, "I'll take you to where you need to go." Yeah. Teaches him to ride a blarg or a blurg.
A blarg, yeah.
This weird bipedal land shark.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
It's like a tadpole with legs and a big mouth.
Yeah,
and that's quite a funny scene where he's trying to learn to ride it, and then they back reference the fact that the Mandalorians back in the day used to ride the Mythosaurus. Yeah. And then he's like, okay, well, I'll just have to be one with the animal and let it in. And then that's when he learns to ride it.
I wasn't crazy about this scene.
I wasn't. No, I thought it was like...
It's slow. I thought
it was trying for levity, and it was a little bit too childish. Whereas the next scene strove for levity as well in the right way.
Yes.
And nailed it. Like, this scene I thought was awesome.
So just to quickly...
Go on.
Backtrack. So at this point, the reason he's gone to this planet is because he's got this mystery. It's so secretive, this bounty. He's only been given the very small component parts, and it's expected that his skills alone will be enough to track down this person. But ultimately, he's got this physical tracker that he's using, and he's found his way to where he believes.
Oh, because he's told it's a 50-year-old as well.
And he's also been told it's a 50-year-old. Yeah. So he thinks he's looking for a 50-year-old...
Somewhere or other.
Adult something or other.
Yeah.
So that's why we've ended up here. And that's why he's on this planet.
And so he gets to the base where he thinks it is, and he sees this bounty droid stroll up and say, "I demand that you give me this thing on behalf of the guild." And it's called IG11. IG11, played by Taika Waititi.
Which I think you would have seen a brief shot of it in the trailer.
Yeah.
When it's the robot that does the bit behind the back shot in the trailer.
It's got like pirouetting eye. It's got like eyes on swivels, head on swivels.
The whole thing is just spinning.
It's basically a spinning top. It's like Zebedee, but with guns.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Springman,
and again, we see the Mandalorian go, "Oh, droids!" Yeah. Like so clearly we're now getting this thread that he doesn't like droids for whatever reason. So this scene turns up and starts shooting everyone.
But they end up in this weird sort of buddy situation that I just
because they're both in the guild.
Because they're both in the guild. They're like he's trying to because realistically he's wanting the cash here as well. So he's trying to manipulate the more straightforward down the line droid into doing what he needs it to do. But there's this brilliant bit where, because the droid is so focused on like following the protocol, that when it thinks it's about to be captured, it's just like initiating self-destruct, and it's like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
and he keeps having to persuade it not to self-destruct. This ball bomb keeps coming out of his chest. It's really funny.
It's really, really good. But it's also just a really fun horde like shootout in a small town scene.
It's a proper Western shootout. People on roofs, a little shot here, behind that. There, eventually,
there's even the up top, and then boom, and someone falls down into the shot.
Everything. And then eventually they win by this. They turn up with a massive gun, big grappling gun, and the Mandalorian finds a way of sort of the droid distracts him. He goes around, kills that guy using his grappling hook again. Gets on the gun, kills everyone, and that's also how there's another funny bit where they both look at it. That's how they get into the door. And now we're in the last. There's this very cool thing where the door just falls. You just see the two silhouettes come in again. Two westerns going into a bar. It had all of that stuff.
So much of that, like that portal, that circular portal door that Star Wars uses for so many things, just so reminiscent of a saloon door. It's just. Like that opening scene in the cantina, like it's just all the trappings, and it's just like just took someone to go like, well, why don't we just actually make it a Western?
Yeah, I know it's a proper Western. So then here we are. We're in this where they believe that the bounty is, they still can't find it, and then there's this just white ball, and they're both confused. Open it up, and moves down the. And it's a little
baby Yoda.
Little cute baby Yoda.
It's a little baby Yoda. I was like,
which
what?
Is incredibly cute.
Yeah.
And that's when they get confused by the 50 years old, because of course
God.
Yoda was thousands of years old.
Yeah. Yoda parents must get bored.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't slept in 50 years.
Yeah. And so clearly someone else is so. The orders to the. This is what I thought was interesting, and I only sort of thought of this afterwards. Actually, the orders given to the Mandalorian were half the reward cold, full reward warm, essentially.
Yeah,
the droid immediately goes to shoot, the little baby, and so clearly there's contradicting. There's some contradicting orders happening. So I don't know if that's going to how much that's going to play out. But then just as you think it's about to shoot, you hear the gun go off, and the droid falls.
Yeah.
And
I'm hoping they resurrect that droid, because it
was very funny.
Brilliant character.
And and he rescues, and then the final scene is just him slowly putting holding his finger out towards the little baby, and the little baby going like that.
Yeah,
and that was it.
And that suddenly like just leaves you with all of these whats and whys and hows, and like, how did the baby get there? What's it for? Why is he so compassionate towards it when he's been nothing but a stone cold killer so far?
And you assume it's because he's an orphan as well. And
but this is also like, this is suddenly the massive injection of Star Wars into what was really a story that was happened to be playing out in Star Wars' galaxy, but not really about Star Wars. This is suddenly like, well, here is something. Like, if you imagine that of Yoda's race, I think there's only been two ever shown in Star Wars canon. And there's Yoda, and there was another one, but both were members of the Jedi Council.
Yes.
So clearly, little green frog people, whatever they're called, are like really Force attuned.
Well, this is the thing. And it's in a white ball, which is sort of reminiscent of other forces in the galaxy. I think the sort of rebel forces,
or Pokemon, I guess,
or Pokemon, yeah. But it almost looks like a rebel thing. I don't know. I really did not expect that.
No.
And the great thing is, again, this is why the show's so good. If you replaced the Mandalorian with Clint Eastwood, and you replace the little baby Yoda with a real baby, that becomes just a normal Western, where it's just like, okay, who's now the hard man's got to look after baby whilst solving the crime or whatever. Like, it all still works. So if you've never seen Star Wars before, you don't have to know what that green thing is. It's just a baby thing that clearly he is having all the same feelings for. I just thought it was, again, that same thing. It was just the right amount of referential. The action was great. I loved that, and this genuinely was quite an astounding shot at the end.
Yeah.
Beautifully
And then
shot.
but then the credits, there was all the art on the credits as well that was also like worth sticking around
Yeah,
for.
so the actual credits roll over just sort of hand-drawn art of some of those final scenes. It's really cool.
I think, like, in summary, I think this was an amazing TV pilot. It set up,
It's
it set out
unbelievable.
everything it wanted to do with the world. It didn't fall into the traps that I think, like, Solo, a Star Wars story did, Rogue One did, of, like, constantly trying to back reference to the point that you're falling over your own feet.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was like confident enough to go, well, the people who get this. So if I just show them the thing, they'll go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then everyone else needs to be able to follow along without being baffled by jargon and references.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think it's the Star Wars TV series that if you're not a Star Wars fan,
Oh, yeah.
you can absolutely enjoy.
Yeah.
Not getting it. I think I saw someone comparing it to, say, Star Trek Discovery, which I think fulfilled a very similar role of like trying to squash a broad, sweeping canon into a high budget, not as high on Star Trek Discovery, but like a high budget sort of retelling, or at least restructuring of the universe to sort of say to do something different. And Discovery expands. And I think also The Mandalorian at some point will now expand on an era of Star Wars that we've never seen before. And I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I'm so excited to see the next ones. I'm absolutely stoked.
Well, if you liked it, let us know in the comments down below. Also, let us know if you would like to see us review each episode as they go out, because they go out on Fridays.
We just will, though, won't we?
They go out on Friday.
I will.
Yeah, so we'll do. So we'll probably do our reviews like Mondays once we get back into the office as like a Monday morning treat. Yeah. First thing we do on a Monday will be watch The Mandalorian. That'd be nice. Thank you so much for watching. Please click the videos that have appeared on the desk to watch more awesome ScreenStalker stuff. I've been Laurie Blake. This has been Simon Longden, and remember, we're watching.